5 seconds to submergence. Submergence deep into the absurd.
It is the stillest words which bring the storm. Thoughts that come with doves' footsteps guide the world. O Zarathustra, thou shalt go as a shadow of that which is to come. Thus wilt thou command, and in commanding go foremost. That's Zarathustra coming right at you. This is a Self-Reliance Part 4 with Mynaa Miesnowan. So where did that quote come from, Mynaa?
Again, first, thanks for having me. That's from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and I don't know what you have the section open. What section is it?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was
the top of my head,
because I wasn't sure how this was organized, but
it's the book in order.
Oh, okay, perfect. Then it's from part 2. It's the very last.
Okay, yeah. So
section of part 2.
Okay.
Of
right.
Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
And then we skip far ahead where he says, it is not enough for me that the lightning no longer doeth harm. I do not wish to conduct it away. It shall learn to work for me. My wisdom hath accumulated long like a cloud. It becometh stiller and darker. So doeth all wisdom which shall one day bear lightnings. Unto these men of today will I not be light, nor be called light. Them will I blind, lightning of my wisdom, put out their eyes. Yeah, and you could ask, like, is he bipolar? And the answer is no, he's actually just willing to be fully human. You see that he goes through the range, and when he comes down from the mountain, he knows who and what he is, but he doesn't necessarily know what he's going to find. And as he finds what he finds, he adjusts himself. And, you see that he has, his own folly, and he's there to bring folly. And he makes his own mistakes and trods on people and lends a helping hand, and, has his sermons, and he does all these things. And, the difference is like, there's nothing in him that he's going to castrate or set aside or deny for the sake of anyone else or anything else. Like, he's going to see this through. He's got a purpose and a mission. And on that note, I'd ask you, so, why did Nietzsche write what he wrote, or just write in general even?
Well, he wrote it because there's this burning fire of passion within him, this like lightning, we'll say, that he just needed to strike out, right? He needed to let loose some of that electricity that was electrifying him.
Yeah.
But not only that, but he wanted to write it towards the people that would understand him, the people that would get him, right? So it's almost there's a psychological barrier to that, and there's also a like want to find others who have sort of that similar way of thinking, that similar kind of mind.
Right. Because he had friends, and he had fallings out, and he had all sorts of, he had his own experiences, right, with people. But at the same time, in his writing, he's not writing to his friends, right? He's definitely not writing to, he's, and then there's a question of, yes, who is he writing? And then the question is, if we think we can understand him, then why, how did he know? Because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. How did he know that we would understand him, or that anyone would understand him?
He didn't.
You're right. He didn't. For all he knew, we'd be forever stupid. For all he knew, we'd be, forever unaware, or, I don't know, whether it's the same old, or.
Forever, we might all just be colorblind. He's the only one that can see red.
Yeah, he saw what it really looked like, and he's trying to tell the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you can't describe a color, right? You can only ever see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he definitely had sensitive instruments.
Yes.
Right.
But if you couldn't see red, I can't say, oh yeah, this is what red looks like. I can't just like describe to you what red looks like if you're blind, right? It'd
Right.
be impossible. So, I mean, that's kind of because like when like some of these authors are writing things, certain people just won't be able to understand them because they're seeing colors. Well,
Right.
like to use the metaphor, like the writer like Ralph Waldo Emerson or Nietzsche, they're seeing colors, and then everyone else that can't see the colors, like they're either never going to see the colors or one day they're going to gain their sight, right? They're going to get that zap of lightning.
Right. Or develop the tools themselves, right? So there's a reason why a teacher is always sought to teach. When Zarathustra saw fit, right, he came on down from the mount, and in that whole discourse you see the whole gamut, the whole range of emotion, from joy to sorrow. He's not really hiding any of it, and no matter what he's doing in there, he's trying to be honest, as terrible as it all is, as painful as it all is, and as often ugly as it all is. But again, the poetry is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes your wisdom comes with dove's footsteps that guide the world, or they come with lightning that blinds the eyes of men. So
Right. I was just searching through the document real quick, or through the book real quick, where he talks about the fire dogs, right? Who he's talking to are the anarchists, and he's talking about the difference of them thinking like, it's the great revolution, and it's this, because it really just never ends, right? It's just it's a cyclical, nature itself seems to be the cyclical conflict, and it comes and goes like the seasons, and our teachings are like that of the magician, and the seasons may change, but the nature, like, I guess it's from an old aphorism, the Buddha Zen, where it says good and evil are but a dancing, the serpentine dance of a dragon. It's ephemeral. So in the section with the fire dogs, he says that while they think it's in the loud, shrill, the bold brash band playing hour, that the world has changed and great things happen. Nietzsche contrasts it, saying it's in our quietest moments that's mankind's biggest moment. I don't remember if he says biggest or because I didn't find the exact line.
Same difference.
Yeah, but and you could say that's him being sweet on his own profession, but there's absolutely but right, there's absolutely something to it. There's a reason why there's people aspire, and there's a reason why they seek honor and respect in certain places, let's say, or whatever it is that people think they're doing when it comes to these domains.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really come up with like big plans in like a loud room. Like, you know what I mean? Like well, you're not at like some party getting drunk and then being like, let's go conquer Poland, I
was gonna say that's pretty good. Your plans is to go get another beer, but okay, let's go conquer Poland. So I remember a friend of mine was in Germany, and I was talking to him over online, and she's like, "Oh, I'm really close. I didn't realize how close it was to put. Realize how close she was to Poland." I'm like, "Yeah, it's close enough you could invade." I guess that's probably a joke that it might not be smiled upon, but
oh well, who cares? So this one time I was like drunk at this party, and then I was talking to this guy. I think he was the president of my fraternity, and I was just saying, dude, we could totally design like this fractile engine thing that can basically provide us with energy, that like infinite amount of energy, like forever. All we have to do is like get all the parts and like look up quantum mechanics and all that. And then he's like, Greg, like I'm just trying to party, man. Like, like stop, please.
Yeah, you gotta know your audience, or get in where you fit in, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So
but luckily we know our audience on this podcast, because I think my assumption is that they're philosophers, but who knows?
I say same old everybody and nobody,
Yep.
So it's always been the case. It'll always be the case. So we've been working through Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay Self-Reliance, and actually at this juncture we're going to take a quick segue into another one of his essays, Nature, on a part on language, just because it's so prescient and it's so relevant, And there's also a question, a philosophical question in it. Do you want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah. The use of natural history is to give us aid in supernatural history. The use of the outer creation to give us language for the beings and changes of the inward creation. Every word which is used to express a moral or intellectual fact, if traced to its root, is found to be borrowed from some material appearance. So, and then you pose the question in this note here, you say, is this where Nietzsche took his inspiration for the genealogy of morals?
Right. Because regardless of if he wrote the book or not, Emerson puts the thought forward right here.
Yeah.
You know, every word which is used to express a moral intellectual fact is traced to its root is found to be borrowed from some material appearance. You know, and this goes back in, you know, and before that, he says with the material appearance, that is natural history. That's what gave us that was our inspiration in supernatural history. You know, from nature and our perception of it, all of this was derived, right? All of the, like, we created the language to describe it. And yes, the people who, those were whoever crafted the language first and foremost, like those people were, you know, they were forging, you know, maybe mankind's most powerful tool. You know, is this, you know, and then I would say this is the gravity of all this, right? Like this is why why it has such weight to it, because again, I guess whether it's an artist, a scientist, or whoever it may be, it's that inevitably to express themselves, explain themselves, relate themselves, they're talking to you in some capacity. You know, not if we stepping aside even the abstract of looking at the art and looking at the artist, let's say, and then maybe you watch an interview, and a lot of times you'll see like, oh, that artist is nowhere near as intelligent as their work might otherwise make you think, right?
Yeah.
You can see some of this stuff like this, you know, because it's interesting to look at, obviously, you know, just good artists and good art, but, you know, it's also fascinating to study the artists themselves. In this case, we're talking about philosophers, because they're an artist too. And, you know, and going back to the oldest one, as he said earlier in the essay, good and bad are but names, very readily transferable to this or that. The only right is what is after my constitution. The only wrong what is against it. You know, and this is the oldest of morality, right? Like, you know, if you get to set the rules and do the shape, you know, craft the laws and do the shaping, you know, it's always come from on high. And then we just discussed, you know, the genealogy of it through nature, language, you know, because nature and language is a biological capacity. So this whole time, it's like we've been looking at you know, we looked at the natural world and whatever reflection of ourselves we saw in it or tried to put into it, you know, because I'll get into it later on in this same essay. Emerson almost, like, this is, to me, this was Emerson putting his own forward his own notion that God is dead. Man is the dwarf of himself. Once he was permeated and dissolved by spirit, he filled nature with his overflowing currents. Out from him sprang the sun and moon. From man, the sun; from woman, the moon. The laws of his mind, the periods of his actions, externalize themselves into day and night, into the year and the seasons. But having made for himself this huge shell, his waters retired, he no longer fills the veins and veinlets. He has shrunk to a drop. He sees that the structure still fits him, but fits him colossally. Say, rather, once it fitted him, now it corresponds to him from far and on high. He adores timidly his own work. Now is man the follower of the sun, and woman the follower of the moon. Yet sometimes he starts in his slumber and wonders at himself and his house, and muses strangely at the resemblance betwixt him and it. He perceives that if his law is still paramount, if still he have elemental power, if his word is sterling yet in nature, it is not conscious power, it is not inferior but superior to his will, it is instinct. Thus my Orphic poet sang. Now let me ask you, first off, isn't that incredible?
Yes.
And second off, like, you know, maybe a little bit more lightning, and, you know, Nietzsche could have written that, right?
Yeah.
And then you wonder, you know, I wonder again, you know, did the notion of the dwarf, did this influence? Because the dwarf is also, right, isn't that what he calls the spirit of gravity off the top of my head?
I don't remember.
Yeah, or no, it's what is it? The dwarfing spirit, I think that's what it is. You know,
Man is a dwarf of himself.
yeah, that's that was Emerson from Nature as well. We'll go through a few more quick points before we get back to the main essay. But you know, here Emerson says it. This is back at bottom of page 24 of the annotated notes, just so you know. Right means straight, wrong means twisted, spirit primarily means wind, transgression, the crossing of a line, supercilious, the raising of the eyebrow. We say the heart to express emotion, the head to denote thought, and emotion are words borrowed from sensible things and now appropriated to spiritual nature. Most of the process by which this transformation is made is hidden from us in the remote time when language was framed, but the same tendency may be daily observed in children. Children and savages use only nouns or names of things which they convert into verbs and apply to analogous mental acts. So again, it's like I see more of the genealogy of morals, right? You know, all that stuff. Nietzsche took it specifically, you know, to Christianity, you know, Judaism, the Abrahamic tradition, as well as, you know, obviously European philosophy in general.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll keep going here. Here's another excerpt from a few paragraphs down in language in nature. Spirit is a creator, spirit hath life in itself, and man in all ages and countries embodies in it language as the father. I'm pretty sure I asked you before, I said, like, it doesn't matter, whatever language and culture and myth you're looking at, I think I might have asked you, do you recognize whose voice that is? And it's like, and I don't remember what I think you said yes. And it's like, yeah, that's dad's voice, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I remember my dad making up stories on the spot when I was a kid. You know, sometimes he was yanking my chain. Sometimes he was, you know, telling me a bedtime story. Sometimes he was, but like I recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything that has that timbre, anything that has that tone, and that you can see carries that weight that's not ephemeral, even if it's us that lay the sense into it. That's what resonates, right? That's what carries through the ages. And that's not to say we can, you know, in terms of the past, it's like, look, we can't move backwards. We're not going to move backwards. It's not going to happen, right? Like, you know, people are where they're at, and as civilization and times change, it's going to be whatever it is. And people are going to have to deal with it as they always have, you know, and we've survived bouts of madness and world wars and, you know, thousands of years of ongoing slavery, right? Like it's not going anywhere. It's not like, okay, so let me ask you, I've asked, I think a few other people maybe this, but for you to truly believe that, like, you know, humanity bore any kind of key away, let's say, that they might be able to actually, like, oh, tomorrow something actually changes, like what would have to happen for you to actually believe that?
So what do you mean by something changes?
I mean that, you know, okay, if eternal recurrence is Zarathustra's most important doctrine and Nietzsche's most important revelation, which he himself claims in his own notebook, since, you know, and by the time, you know, he's towards the end of his life writing his autobiography, and he says, you know, that's my most important works, my magnum opus, my greatest gift to mankind, and also that, what is it, that he hasn't said anything new since then, you know, it tells you something.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to say it's not until his animals, like his animals are talking about it while he's convalescing, that like he just hasn't realized it yet.
So,
you know, they're the ones, they realize it before he does, and even though he's already been preaching it. But anyway.
So you're saying, like, if, say, tomorrow humanity were to
yeah, someone says they got the final solution and it's not horrible, you know, and it's not the same old models of the past, you know, like it's like, oh, this actually, oh, look, you can solve the problems without something, you know, barbaric or of the Philistine mind, or, you know.
What would it take to make me believe in their plan?
Basically.
It would take a lot. I'd have to see results. But of course, I mean, if they were to, say, test, if it wasn't, like, if you didn't have to expand this, say, plan to the entire planet, and if you could just consolidate to one area, and then I could see if it works there, and then I could see, like, how it goes. Sure, maybe. But I'm not sure
right,
if I want Yeah,
Same
like
model still. It's just funny because right, nothing right so far. That's our best guess. Is like we need the data, and
yeah,
we'll see, right? Like uh, Nietzsche himself said of the philosophy of his time, sure, it'll be worth the experiments. Just it basically said to prove you guys wrong, and it's
yeah.
like, did anyone learn anything? And it's like, well, to the degrees anyone still thinks those
Mhm.
stale, like old world dead ideas that emerge from God's supernova.
Yeah,
Because to me, it's like, communism and socialism, just as you see to be the logical conclusion of Christianity. Because it's like now the government, now you could say Pontius Pilate is actually, rather than just trying to wipe his hands, he's acknowledging that they have any responsibility to these people.
yeah,
Right. That's one way of looking at it, at least. I mean, we could frame it and look at it in any number of ways. But it seems to be these days people do think and say that no, he doesn't get to just keep washing his hands of the responsibility.
yes,
And they say that for a number of reasons. And you see that, like, in a lot of ways, it's like, well, it's cyclical. This is why it's eternally recurrent, because the pressures on one side, create pressures on the other, right? And it just goes round and round. The revolution doesn't stop. And the question
yeah,
is, well, how is there, like, could you, or would you, like, if you try and stop it, is that actually where we die? Because is that where you have us, like just all in some big prison? I guess it could be a big, this is like Skynet talk, right? It's like a big, if it's like a
yeah.
big digital surveillance state, then it's like, I don't know that Westerners conceive of that as life, at least, to a certain degree. It's definitely, you had asked the question last time of, it depends what you think these changes might be, or what Skynet actually means, and it's a portent of, or it's rather a
Yeah,
question of, how will people be any better off in the system? Because, and also the concerns, when it comes to, let's say, back to our philosophies, the logical conclusions of Christianity. Because even look at Europe after it corrupted, what was left, it's like they, inevitably they wound up on these philosophies, which were like, yeah, we're going to try and take care of everybody, and they were trying to go in that, whatever weird twisted directions before that, with that same kind of thought process. It's the age old kind of crusader mindset, right? It's the age old, will to power.
mhm. Or will to destruction.
Yeah, that happens too. How do you know, and it's hard to say when, I guess that's the thing. If, like, you can't see where yours is leading you, then that's when the experiment inevitably might take place, and then you might find out.
Yeah, but
So
even then, so even the problem with that, like, just like going back to my own logic, and
sure.
with me saying, oh yeah, like, how would I know if they found like a solution to fix all humanity's problems? Like, what would it take to make me believe that? Well, even if they did it in one town, I mean, or like one nation, like the geography in that nation is different. The crops that they can grow in that nation are different. The
Right.
Animals that live there, the people that live there, the culture that lives there. Just so many things are so different in that nation that it would be, even then, I wouldn't have enough to say, oh yeah, let's expand that to the whole planet, right?
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
it's
with
pretty
that,
presumptuous. I mean, and it's
yeah,
also that, and look, it's still that same old tendency to unity, right? Like, oh, we will, like, sometimes when I think of the phrase "resist not evil," I almost hear "join us," right? Like, that's what comes to my mind.
yeah,
Right? You're saying,
join
like,
your
because
dad.
that's that. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the tendency, right? Like, trying to become one before we fall apart again. Um, and now that we're way over here, Nietzsche says in Schopenhauer and his educator, bringing it back around to reality. In the meantime, every philosophy which believes that the problem of existence is touched on, not to say solved, by a political event is a joke and pseudo philosophy. Many states have been founded since the world began. That is an old story. How should a political innovation suffice to turn men once and for all into contented inhabitants of the earth, right? So it's not just a question, everyone concerns themselves with systems. It's like, but what about the people? Is anyone concerned with actually, crafting better people, or is it just that it's a million little coercions? Because when I asked you before about like whether it's Microsoft Word making a suggestion about a word that might be offensive, or social media people yelling at you, or your mom or your dad or your sister or your cousin or your uncle or your friends, or the people online or the people on the sub or the people on the telephone, asking, begging, pleading, pushing, prodding, doing all these things to, what are they doing to you, Greg? Like,
Yeah.
wow, all these people around you, asking for your time and your money and your effort and your plan. Like, what are their intentions for you? Like, what are they actually doing? Like if you think about it, it's really endless. It's a million billion little coercions, and it's not. I know it's not just me. Other people notice these things too.
Yes. Well, but it's also, it's not always malicious intent, right?
Oh well, that's not. Yeah, but that's not the. It's not. That's not what we're not. Okay, right now, I'll say we're not concerning ourselves with either the value, that kind of value judgment, good or bad or evil.
Yes.
I just mean if you consider that your mind, your body, right, you're under assault 24/7 by influencing forces, and to the point where it's reflected, it still reflects in your dreams, and you wake up and you say that seemed more real than this right here. Like I'm sad sometimes. Like I don't remember this. Like if you ever had a dream before you wake up and then you're sad because you're like, oh, that was an awesome dream. Like whatever I was doing, wherever I was at is awesome.
Dude, I was just thinking about that. Because I was going to say,
do we have a word for that?
Up like crying from dreams.
I think we need a word for that.
Oh God, that dream is so awesome. But now I'm awake.
Yeah,
but I've also woken up so happy that I was awake.
Oh,
because
sure.
I wasn't in the dream anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But dude, there are thousands, billions, trillions of outside forces that come into play when you exist, just like into your conscious pool of thought and actions.
Well, and it makes sense. So it does make sense that you go along with them, right? It makes sense that you do as you're told. It makes sense, because there's so many of them, and we're trained to be obedient, in
some ways to some things when it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have our own, like in the West, we have a very, we have a very, strong tradition of being loudmouths and smart asses and shit disturbers and like our own, trust me, like our own tradition of that is great. Yeah,
jaywalkers.
Oh yeah, lawbreakers. So I guess we'll keep moving here. It is easily seen, this still from actually Nature and Language. It is easily seen that there's nothing lucky or capricious in these analogies, but they are constant and pervade nature. These are not the dreams of a few poets here and there, but man is an analogist and studies relations to all objects. He is placed in the center of beings, and an array of relation passes from every other being to him, and neither can man be understood without these objects, nor these objects without man. All the facts in natural history taken by themselves have no value, but are barren like a single sex. So, and I put a note here saying you could call this the frame problem. We don't just exist arbitrarily, but in relation to one another, the world, objects therein. How do we understand and navigate any of it? Right? Yeah, it's a serious question because we actually, no one could give you a satisfactory answer to this because no one actually, in fact, knows. I think Nietzsche's interpretation is the will is a multiplicity of forces, is as the fundamental unit of the other conscious and unconscious biological processes is one of the best descriptions, regardless of, it's not to me, again, you could frame it any number of ways. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right. I just think it's pretty useful and good as a description. And given some of his other hypotheses that were proven right through kind of history and psychology and sociology, it's like, it's a pretty good measurement and standard, that he set.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really know yourself without conceptualizing yourself in relation to other things. I mean, even the use of language itself.
Isn't that what a child does? Like, what was your earliest memory of saying no? How many times did you say no before you learned that brought consequences, or before you got so thoroughly thwarted that you learned to stop asking or asserting?
Dude, I didn't even know. I wasn't really much of a no sayer. I think I said a lot. But I mean, sometimes I didn't want to do something, like I didn't want to go somewhere. So I'd like say no and cry. Like, This one
Sure.
time, like I had to have this babysitter because my mom couldn't watch me one day, and I just did not have it, dude. Like we went to like this water park, and I was crying, and she was just like so angry, like the babysitter. And then
Why? Because you're a miserable kid?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least she didn't leave you there.
Yeah, true. I would have rather she did though, to be honest. But yeah, man. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like how many times you have to say no until you're like, hey dude, like you can't say no all the time. You gotta say yes eventually. Or like to some things you just have to say yes to.
Right. Well, if you try to say no to everything, it's like, you're going to paint yourself into a corner, and it's, I think again, context and, I think no is a way of life works, but you got to know what you're doing. And
Exactly.
that's to me saying no is a way of life. Like I'm consolidating all this. That's like self-reliance in a nutshell, let's say, because that's the thing. It's like, you will get thrown and you will get thrown and you will get thrown and you will get thrown until you learn, fundamental principle in learning anything, really. I was thinking specifically like fighting, martial arts, that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
we'll keep going.
Yeah,
and then I'll say this because
yeah.
the most important thing there, these are not the dreams of a few poets. He's saying like, these are the units and measures we've established is what we've seen. I'll keep going. Is that good? Or do you have something else?
Yeah, I think we should get into the self-reliance.
Yeah, but it's so good though. You don't understand. Like, no one else is like,
else?
like you gotta like, we can't turn on the news and see this, right? You can't, like, no one else on social media is talking about this. So like, I got to put it out there, right?
Yeah.
As we go back in history, language becomes more picturesque until it's in its infancy, when it is all poetry or all spiritual facts are represented by natural symbols. The same symbols are found to make the original elements of all languages. It has moreover been observed that the idioms of all these languages approach each other in passages of the greatest eloquence and power. And as this is the first language, so it is the last. This immediate dependence of language upon nature, this conversion of an outward phenomenon into a type of somewhat in human life, never loses its power to affect us. I laughed, it's funny wording there. Going on, is this which gives us that piquancy to the conservation of a strong-natured farmer or backwoodsman, which all men relish. So, he's saying that, again, I guess father usually sounds the same, like these myths, by the time one attains that kind of understanding and that ability to communicate in the deeper understanding of what it all means, of at least to you, right, or whoever the perceiver is, with it, by the time you can reflect and expound such, like, it's changed you, right? Or you've changed it. It's hard to say. It's changed you. I don't know. We'll keep going.
Well, it's always going to change you, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's ongoing until the day you die. But I mean, by the time you can actually, like, to the same way you couldn't say that, oh, no, that you couldn't really tell you exactly if and when that process transpired of, being more, to the degrees that not, some people are just more agreeable or disagreeable, right? It's temperament. We'll keep going here. Thus is nature an interpreter by whose means men converse with his fellow men. A man's power to connect his thought with its proper symbol and so to utter it depends on the simplicity of his character, that is, upon his love of truth and his desire to communicate it without loss. Right. This reminds me of, like, you saying Nietzsche had a passion, and he says it himself. People ask me why I write so much or whatever, something like that. And he says, well, I'm just trying to, he's like, I'm trying to get rid of it, and that's exactly it. His desire to communicate it without loss. The corruption of man is followed by the corruption of language. And my annotation here is, this is Orwell and Nietzsche, right? They explain these things very well. When simplicity of character and the sovereignty of ideas is broken up, the prevalence of secondary desires, the desires of riches, of pleasure, of power, and of praise, and then my annotation, drives of decadence versus drives of health, and duplicity and falsehood take place of simplicity and truth, the power over nature as an interpreter of the will is in a degree lost. New imagery ceases to be created, and old words are perverted to stand for things which are not. A paper currency is employed when there is no bullion in the vaults. In due time, the fraud is manifest. Now, that's pretty timely, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep going. And words lose all power to stimulate the understandings or the affections. Hundreds of writers may be found. Who kept all the gold, by the way? We'll just keep going. Hundreds of writers may be found in every long civilized nation who for a short time believe and make others believe that they see and utter truths, who do not let of themselves clothe one thought in its natural garment, but who feed unconsciously on the language created by the primary writers of the country, those namely who hold primarily on nature. Right, and I think of Nietzsche as a holder, because the Genealogy of Morals was a profound understanding of how it all shaped our physiology. He was looking directly into, almost behind the scenes, right into the machinery of it. I think of Zaf saying, we see modern man, we see mechanism to the point of we see it in the smile of our beloved, or anything like that. That's like modern overload.
Mm-hmm.
And then from here, yeah, there's more stuff, but mostly I will defer back to him talking about this was I guess this is Emerson's own little Zarathustra. He called his Orphic poet, right? He couches it in this poetry he writes, but it's really him. The foundations of man are not in matter, but in spirit, but the element of spirit is eternity. To it, therefore, the longest series of events, the oldest chronologies are young and recent, and the cycle of the universal man, from whom the known individuals proceed, centuries or points, and all histories but the epoch of one degradation. We distrust and deny inwardly our sympathy with nature. We own and disown our relation to it by turns. We are, like Nebuchadnezzar, dethroned, bereft of reason, and eating grass like an ox. But who can set limits to the remedial force of spirit? A man is a god in runes. Where men are innocent, life shall be longer and shall pass into the immortal as gently as we awake from dreams. Now the world would be insane and rabid if these disorganizations should last for hundreds of years. Hint, hint, hint. It is kept in check by death and infancy. This is one of the best parts. Is kept in check by death and infancy. Infancy is a perpetual Messiah, which comes into the arms of fallen men and pleads with them to return to paradise. Now, how appropriate that Emerson spoke so much of children, and then this is where we'll get back in Self-Reliance, but that he spoke so much of children, saying he might not be able to communicate to us, but he's communicating to his fellows in the other room, right? In his own words, they will make us very unnecessary. And with those words I just read, think of Nietzsche coming along. Nietzsche, I don't even think was born yet, because this would have been in the 1840s, right around. Is Nature from? I don't remember if it's his first essays or his second essays off the top of my head.
I'm not sure, but this is right here. This is Camel, Lion, Child.
Yeah, and then this is finally the last part. What I read earlier when I said this reminds me of Nietzsche's own version of God, or when he saw the decline, when he saw the degradation. Emerson was talking about it here in 1840s. By the time Nietzsche comes along and sees it and really blows the lid on it, there it is, lightning it, put out their eyes, man. So I think we're on. I said bottom of 28. I think.
The top of 28. The bottom of 27.
Yep, there we are.
Yep. Cool. All right. I will.
Self-Reliance continued.
Self-Reliance continues. This is so from the that math.dartmouth.edu PDF that I posted on the show notes. We're on page 8. We're on the second half of page 8, if you wanted to follow along. Okay. I hope in these days we have heard the last of conformity and consistency. Let the words be gazetted and ridiculous henceforward. Instead of the gong for dinner, let us hear a whistle from the Spartan fife. Let us never bow and apologize more. A great man is coming to eat at my house. I do not wish to please him. I wish that he should wish to please me. I will stand here for humanity, and though I would make it kind, I would make it true. Let us affront and reprimand the smooth mediocrity and squalid contentment of the times, and hurl in the face of custom and trade and office the fact which is the upshot of all history, that there is a great responsible thinker and actor working whether a man works, that a true man belongs to no other time or place, but is the center of things. Where he is, there is nature. He measures you and all men and all events. Ordinarily, every body in society reminds us of somewhat else, or of some other person. Character, reality, reminds you of nothing else. It takes place of the whole creation. The man must be so much, that he must make all circumstances indifferent. Every true man is a cause, a country, and an age, requires infinite spaces and numbers and time fully to accomplish his design. And posterity seems to follow his steps as a train of clients. A man, Caesar, is born, and for ages after, we have a Roman Empire. Christ is born, and millions of minds so grow and cleave to his genius that he is confounded with virtue and the possible of man. And institution is the lengthened shadow of one man, as monachism of the hermit, Antony, the Reformation of Luther, Quakerism of Fox, Methodism of Wesley, abolition of Clarkson, Scipio, Milton, called the height of Rome. And all history revolves itself very easily into the biography of a few stout and earnest persons.
Right. They're never really seen as figureheads and spearheads. And, you know, again, I guess you could also say plenty of us have made the mistake of having heroes, but yet at the same time, you know, such men, such people, they never really make us, you know, look around at what's possible. They show us the potential, which is what he says earlier. Remember exactly where it's at. Something about it's. I guess I'll go to the first note. You know, when he says, "I will stand here for humanity, and though I would make it kind, I would make it true." You know, let us affront and reprimand the smooth mediocrity and the squalid contentment of the times. You know, and this makes me think of Nietzsche from Schopenhauer's Educator. Who is there then amid these dangers of our era to guard and champion humanity, the inviolable sacred treasure gradually accumulated by the most various races? Who will set up the image of man when all men feel in themselves only the self-seeking snake and currish fear, and have thus declined from that image to the level of animal or even automata? Right, like this was Emerson again, right? He drew his line over by Walden. Nietzsche drew his, and I could probably say by Sills, right? Like that was his favorite spot. We'll keep going. Let us front and reprimand the trade the office. Okay, the upshot of all history, where there is a great responsible thinker and actor, wherever a man works.
Wherever a man works.
I put a note from Zarathustra in here.
Yeah.
Amazing is the okay, maybe it's more reflective of the nature we read earlier, but do you want to read it a little? Read maybe like that first few lines.
Yeah. So it's
many.
The note that we have from the annotated notes. It's wherever a man works, and then this is from Zarathustra. Many a one hath said, there hath surely a God filched something from me secretly whilst I slept, verily enough to make a girl for himself therefrom. Amazing is the poverty of my ribs, thus hath spoken many a present day man. Ye are laughable unto me, ye present day men, and especially when ye marvel at yourselves. And woe unto me if I could not laugh at your marveling, and had to swallow all that is repugnant in your platters. As it is, however, I will make lighter of you, since I have to carry what is heavy, and what matters if beetles and maybugs also alight on my load.
That's just hilarious.
I'm not even sure what that.
Well,
I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, he's got it. Okay, I'll explain it in terms of one of his own aphorisms. Which one is it? I think it's Daybreak, and in Daybreak he says something like, ye strongest men, or something, ye strongest thinkers. You know, it's like, oh, you know, you guys are all so high and mighty, like thank God you're over there to be up so high and let us carry, you know, don't mind us while we carry the load. I'm totally botching the words, but the sentiment is there, and it's hilarious. I know what you mean. Do you want me to find it? I can pull it up real quick.
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, we can keep moving. So I just thought that was relevant, is that again, despite the decadence, it was mainly because I think it's in that same section. Maybe it is. Uh,
I
I
like
think
your
it's
little
because
note about
inevitably,
um yeah, I like your note about Voltaire here.
yeah,
Um
he was the one. I misattributed the quotation originally, I think, but
where
yeah,
he is, there is nature, he measures you and all men and all events.
yes,
Voltaire, philosopher lays the words at another's feet. Nietzsche, man is not fit to judge.
right. There's more to it obviously than that, but those are kind of like getting to their more logical
Yeah,
conclusions, right? Voltaire, because it's convenient to say, oh, I'm not adding anything to it. I'm just bringing your own, thoughts and words and deeds to your attention. Uh,
yeah,
but everyone's got their reasons. So, the point of the quotation above is, I think, getting towards the end of it, thus do I love only my children's land, because he's talking about,
mhm,
the old ways, the fatherlands, the motherlands, you present day men, like this is a dead end, right? It's not going anywhere, right? The old ways, like we do have to
yeah,
keep moving forward in whatever ways we can. Um, so unto my, and there it is. Thus do I love only my children's land, undiscovered in the remotest sea, for it do I bid my sails search and search. Unto my children will I make amends for being the child of my fathers, and unto all the future for this present day. Thus spake Zarathustra.
hmm,
And like if you think of it, like if you just took the above quotation, and because it's to me, I kind of see Zarathustra as in like these are the places and conditions upon which Nietzsche would say this.
yeah,
He's not going to, there's like he's being a hard ruler and a hard bed for a good reason.
yeah.
um
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do kind of need to, I mean, when you're writing philosophy, like you can't really always set like a setting, right, for which a philosophy would apply. But when he wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he did have that setting, right?
right, yeah, well, it's again with the symbols, back to
Mm-hmm.
Emerson's own discussion on it.
Yeah.
It's a Zarathustra, it's a prime example of that symbolism and how it works in nature. And there he is. That's the whole thing is he's out there, living. He's in it. He's been there for a long time, and he's
Yes.
going back down to man. Behold his serpent and his eagle,
Hmm.
or his eagle and his serpent. So I guess we keep going. Every man is a cause of country and age. This line is pretty good. This is a very like sly criticism, right? Christ
Yeah.
is born, and millions of minds so grow and cleave to his genius that he is confounded with virtue and the possible of man. So I think of Nietzsche's words: there was
Yeah.
only one Christian, and he died on a cross. That was quite the conflation, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, everyone can be like Christ. It doesn't seem, tell that. What about the evil ones then, right? There's
Yeah.
another Nietzsche maxim, right?
That's an awesome thing you wrote there.
About
There
which,
was only one Christian and he died on a cross. Wait,
oh,
so
that
Nietzsche
that
said
was
that?
that Nietzsche's. Yeah, Nietzsche
Oh,
says that
wow.
directly. Yeah, I think that's his direct line. And then the
Wow.
second closest one, because I was telling someone the other day, I don't remember who, but like I appreciate Christians at their wackiest, and one of the fewest I can think of is, and I mean, out of all the whole Christian family tree, right?
Yeah.
He's a Seventh-day Adventist. Mel Gibson made the movie Hacksaw Ridge about him, but it's Desmond Doss or Doss. But his story is so unbelievable they had to tie it down because he refused to carry a weapon. He got bullied and beat up in the military, but he served. And then by the time he's dying on Hacksaw Ridge, like he's saving everybody, including the enemy. He's still not carrying a weapon. By the time he's getting carried on a stretcher, he sees people worse off than him and gets off and lets them get on. And then he gets like further shot and halfway blown up by a grenade.
Yeah.
He is living it there,
Mhm.
through this horror,
Yeah.
and he's doing it. And it's like, okay, so there were two Christians in history. Maybe,
Yeah.
there's a few others who were kind of close, but
Yeah, I saw that movie.
yeah, okay. So there you go. And no, the book is pretty slim. A lot of the literature on him, because there's a lot
Yeah.
on military history and stuff out there in general. But
Yeah, no, that was crazy, dude. He saved like over 100 people, didn't he?
Yeah, he was nuts. Oh, and then in the movie they actually toned it down. They didn't even put his full, like all the stuff he did. They didn't even bother putting it in because they're like, it almost would seem over the top, So that was actually
Yeah.
apparently an artistic choice.
Wow.
So that's you think of Nietzsche's criticism, and he talks about again how that one man inevitably will leave, and inevitably, like you look at all these men, it's like, yeah, most of them were educated. They came from either the court or close by, or some higher stratum of society or some respected stratum of society. So it's like once upon, and Emerson's going to keep getting, without us getting into that sort of thing right now, Emerson will shortly. But I think there was. No, I guess that about covers it for now. We'll keep moving.
Okay.
Are we at let a man know his worth?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Let a man then know his worth and keep things under his feet. Let him not peep or steal or skulk up and down with the air of a charity boy, a bastard, or an interloper in the world which exists for him. But the man in the street, finding no worth in himself which corresponds to the force which built a tower or sculptured a marble god, feels poor when he looks on these. To him a palace, a statue, or a costly book have an alien and forbidding air, much like a gay equipage, and seem to say like that, "Who are you, sir?" Yet they all are his, suitors for his notice, petitioners to his faculties that they will come out and take possession. The picture waits for my verdict. It is not to command me, but I am to settle its claims to praise. That popular fable of the sot who is picked up dead drunk in the street, carried to the Duke's house, washed and dressed, and laid in the Duke's bed, and on his waking, treated with all obsequious ceremony like the Duke, and assured that he had been insane, owes its popularity to the fact that it symbolizes so well the state of man, who is in the world a sort of sot, but now and then wakes up, exercises his reason, and finds himself a true prince.
So that's Heraclitus, who is in the world a sort of sot, and it's Heraclitus. And it's a lot of ancient thinkers who are like, oh, again, look, they're childlike, they're drunk, they're asleep, whatever the terminology may be. So at the top, I think it's it's obviously he's talking about pathos of the heights and pathos of the distance. Let a man then know his worth and keep things under his feet. He's a civilized man, and he talks about how he's got those vestiges that are too civilized, where again, when someone comes along and asks him for a dime for a cause, like he recognizes that, he's not obligated.
Yes.
He's not obligated, and that if every last request can sway you, so there's nothing left of you.
Yeah, I mean, if every request can sway you to,
right,
just
but at the same time,
you hop at your feet, right? And what
right.
are you?
But something to note here is, I think he's also implying, let them don't be, the air of whether it's a charity boy, a bastard, an interloper. It's like, it's almost like acting like you don't belong here, or like you're trying to, I don't know. It's maybe, it seems maybe it's the difference of, it actually makes me really think of him saying, again, the difference between being who and what you are alone, being who and what you are amongst the crowd, let's say.
Yeah.
That kind of fine line, it kind of reminds me of that. Like, but man in the street. So, but here's the issue, right? The man in the street, finding no worth in himself, which corresponds to the force which has built a tower or sculpted a marble god, feels poor when he looks on these. I also think of Wagner, the line that goes, what then, poor man, have you enjoyed? Right? Nietzsche talks about it in same Schopenhauer's Educator. I'll find it real quick. What then, Wagner's Tannhauser, Act 2. There you go. So where are we at? Right. So we see, you see all these things that work around you, and it's almost like they exist to make you feel small. Like imagine if you had to build the pyramid. I think that would make a profound effect on you. You'd be like, wow,
Yes,
I
it
just
would.
like, look at this pyramid I'm building for this guy. I suck. I'm just but at the same time, it's like, when you're getting paid and if you're a part of it, and this is just your culture and what you do, because building and expansion has always
Yeah.
been a part of culture.
Yes, it always has.
Right. It's like, we build big freeways, but like, we're not like housing a king's corpse in there.
Yeah.
We have all sorts of big building projects. They never really stopped, and it's always been popular. And then they do, it inspires, again, if like that's Nietzsche asking the question of the races and their treasures, it's like all these cultures, what they've built over time, in language and otherwise, that again, that it houses us, and it's there to inspire us. But instead, a lot, I guess maybe it's the epitome of modern life, that instead it dwarfs us because it's so much bigger and there's so many mass forces. And then in the media landscape is so loud, it's almost like, well, people came to be individuals just to be bowled over by a mass force anyway. It's like, oh, maybe we should have just been mindless insects, right? Like, what was the point then? Almost, right? Like that's how, and I don't say that to say that's true or right or wrong or anything, but to say that in terms of modern cynicism and nihilism and things like that, that those thought processes and those feelings are completely understandable.
Yes. Man is the dwarf of man.
Yeah. And then when you can see that, Emerson talking about it in the 1840s, and then Nietzsche talking about it in the late 1800s, right? That it's been ongoing. It's like it actually hasn't really stopped or gone anywhere. It's still, we're going on to these next technological revolutions. And I guess the question is, as we in the West here head into this period of decline, is a question of, provided we don't destroy ourselves or something else doesn't come along, how long will it take us to sort it out? And do we become ghosts in the machine? Are we looking for God in the machine? And then as a result, do we become ghosts in the machine because of it? Do we if something cool happens and you don't post it on social media, did it happen? Right? Like if this is where life and culture now manifests, it shows you that, and I guess that this has always been the case, right? That, people, regardless of time and place, exist, in different realities, different conditions, different forces. So, I guess one man's luxury is another man's poison. Whether, I think about all the ideology and idealism that's prevalent these days.
I like that you turned that cliche on its head there.
Which one?
Well, one man's trash is another man's treasure. But you just said,
what'd I say?
Well, you said the opposite of that.
I think I said one man's something is another man's poison. I don't remember.
Yeah. I don't remember what you said, like the first thing, but like one man's treasure is another man's poison, basically. And yes, you're right. Like, absolutely.
Right. Because I mean, like we clearly, we're meant for different roles, different jobs. Not like, not everyone can or will do the same things. And it's like that unifying tendency to seem to want to try. It's very utilitarian, right? Very Western, very liberal, very ideal, to try and be like, oh, everyone for everything, for everywhere, for all time, for free. Yeah. And it's just like, whoa, it's like, I don't consider myself an economist, but the economist in me still says like, nope, the age old truism applies, like no free lunch. Whether even if you're Caesar, like even when you're
some rainbows on the walls too, and like make it a little daycare center as well.
Well, I mean, that's actually, I want to say I read something in Nietzsche that, or somewhere, something similar where they're just kind of talking about that. Or I know it's Nietzsche and Zarathustra. I think he's talking about them being like children who are scrawling on the walls. Or I don't remember. Maybe he's the one being the child scrawling on the walls.
Yeah,
I don't remember off the top of my head. It's so dense and poetic that, like, I feel like if I'm going to reference it, I have to have it in front of me. Otherwise, it's just going to get lost to that poetic, symbolic void. Because like it was Zarathustra, it has to be very specific. Like a lot of his sentiments, I feel like you can just kind of explain, or you know what I mean, or you can at least get an angle on, or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas, and with Zarathustra, it's like, no, you better take a finer tooth comb.
Yeah.
And, obviously it's open to interpretation. So it's more than one thing. And it's meant that way because the more dense and the more profound something is, what you see as the greatest poets understand how, and writers understand how to consolidate language. Yeah. So in an entire, like with Nietzsche, an entire eternity is, or not eternity, a century is condensed into a paragraph, a millennia into 2 paragraphs, right? Like, that's kind of how he worked, and he did it intentionally, and he knew what he was doing. And that's the profound nature of language. this is why I had to include those bits from nature. Thank you for your putting up with me.
Yeah.
So let's see, there might be a few more things to say about this one before we go on. I mean, obviously, I just think this is worth mentioning because, the notion of we built a civilization as a people, we built a civilization and a culture, all these different people, all these different places.
Yeah.
And any place where it happens, it's like, well, it exists there for your people. And ideally it's to survive and for your health and your benefit. And then there's a question of when that goes wrong, then how do you what's I guess the best question to ask is like, well, what's the closest return to that kind of, not homeostasis, but whatever you call it. If these revolutions get long-winded and overhand, if the repression, like Zaf says, has become so brutal and loud and terrible, right? It shows you that it's almost like what's that principle when things speed up and we'll leave it by the side.
When what speeds up? What do you mean?
Okay, on rotation.
Rotation.
I'm
like
thinking
centrifugal force.
Yes, specifically if it's out of balance, the way it throws off that revolution. Let's say we'll simplify it as mechanistically as possible, right? Like a fan on a single right, a fan on a single post just spins, right? Like it works on or a wheel on an axle, right?
Yeah, and then if it spins too fast, it starts rotating the whole fan starts moving, and then it might just break off, right?
Right. So to me, that's what eternal recurrence within civilizations and societies look like. You can, history with better data and studying it in real time, and also in the past, it's you can see, at least from the image we create from what we know and seen and what the evidence we do have, you can see how these things kind of this culture, society, it finds this, and then there's a question of, can they ever perpetually, well, is it ever possible to do that, or is it just our nature to always spin out, whether it's the people and their resentments, or if it's the leadership and their ineptitude, right? I guess we're looking at the best or the worst at the bottom and the top. When people think of corruption and parasites, is what the sort of stuff they think of.
So the thing is, we're always going to spin out, but the whole world's not going to spin out at the same time, right? There are different cultures and governments and religions that will spin out at separate times, and because the Roman Empire at one point was spinning perfectly. It was in some equilibrium, and then all some of the countries around it were spinning out of whack.
Well, look, in the West, our confessions in our politics, man, because if utilitarianism is our primarily de facto value of pragmatism, or rather it's what was left in our lap after a few millennia, let's say, right? This is what we build. If this is what we're left with, it's telling that our politics are we'll just settle for this. It's clear that people are terrible and horrible, and that we just need to make dependence of the state of everybody. It's telling that, and I'm not saying that for or against socialism. I'm just saying that if that's where we've landed, it tells you exactly how pessimistic our thought is of man. Because if the notion is, well, these guys ain't making it happen. They're not gonna they're not building the bridge to the overman, well, government dependency for them, right? At the very least, it's and I get it. It's utilitarian. It's going okay, well, if it chills everybody out, a bit, and then my thought is again, but we go back to Nietzsche blows through this, and this, so long as a philosopher knows that it's it's obvious what it is, and that it's not actually a good answer. It's just understanding, because this is the unfortunate thing about philosophy, is when you're honest, eventually you go to, here's what's most telling in a philosopher, I think is always worth mentioning. If their philosophy, inevitably concludes with the course of action they want to take, and it's often revolution or violence, right, or whatever it is, it's it's pretty telling that, oh, how convenient, the philosophy that you deduce that's correct, it just so happens to land on what you want. And all the more so if they actually aspire it to any kind of natural or in eternal goodness or morality, or any of that stuff, and that's within conservatism and Christianity, that doesn't matter because that's built in, right? So it's it's just kind of first principle, doesn't matter to us here. And then but with secular liberalism, it's there's less of a chance that they're going to do that, yet they're still using that whole, master morality claim of, we are the clean ones. These others are impure. Like, we will wash them clean. They will get the punishment and cruelty they deserve, right? But at least in terms of socialism, less so communism, because the resentment comes out more there, right?
Yeah.
Socialism seems more pessimistic, where communism is more not just atavistic at this point, because it's centuries old, stillborn, right? Like, we have yet to see, I guess, aside, it's funny to me that the only stable so-called communist country that ever existed was China. Like, Westerners can pull it off.
Yeah.
The Chinese did. It's like, that's amazing to me. Like, you got to give credit where credit's due, to the degrees that communism worked as a power play to change it to whatever degrees that those up at the top wanted to change it by using those at the bottom as tools, or blocks of wood or pawns, or however you want to conceive it. And there's not much difference in how the technocrats now are doing that sort of thing. And, at the end result, again, is just like, okay, look, maybe, at the very least, Americans are a little, like, not to say they're a little less insidious, and by the time Skynet takes over, like, we won't have to even worry about this or think about this.
Yeah.
Like, we will have found our Eden. I'm pretty sure it's death, but maybe, at the very least, the steps on the way there for the years to come, whatever the, new nadir we settle for, and new agreement that gets worked out, maybe it will be for the better, or at least it'll be a Band-Aid on, this other thing. Because with this generational problem, there comes a generational solution. And the fact that anything hasn't been implemented tells you that, like, oh, they haven't even begun to fix anything yet.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of our government, it's like, look, they know what they're doing in terms of manipulation. They don't know what they're doing in terms of actually fixing what exact, because, look, it's clear that, obviously they hide a lot, but they would never say, they'd never be honest about what exactly is wrong here, nor would they be able to fully tell you. So, either the collective of it or an individual in it. They're not going to do it. It's just impossible.
So what do you think of the whole, like, UFO, like the Pentagon releasing the UFO files and all that? Like, do you think that was just like a distraction, or like what?
That could be. You never know.
Like,
I mean, you
just
can't,
like, why?
you can't put anything
that was just
past
like
them.
so. Just like everyone heard about it, then they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, it's like no one cared. It was just.
Right.
I mean, I didn't care. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, but it's like, look, it's fascinating, and it might be a big nothing. And yes, I'm interested, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it's like, well, until more data comes out on that, it's like, no, there's other things that are relevant to us. So
yeah, I guess it was just like so irrelevant that it's like, just like, come on, dude. Like, we've been talking about UFOs for years. You just now like putting these out, like, come on.
Yeah. Wait, what about Roswell? People are still interested. So, and I put a note on that last part of that last Emerson quotation, or from the essay itself.
Yeah, sometimes people wake up and stay awake.
Yeah, sometimes just go back to sleep, and and then he kind of distinguished that. Oh yeah, and the word "sot," I got to make a correction back to like a podcast or two ago that we did use the word "sot." I think I said it was idiot, but I was thinking of a different word. I think, and "sot" is a drunkard. So. That's proper use of that word.
Yeah, he was in the world a sort of sot, but now and then wakes up, exercises his reason, and finds himself a true prince.
Right, and then him talking about the pedigree earlier in the essay we went over before is saying, like, yeah, we recognize that when we see that someone kind of has that spark, like, yeah, we like to see it.
Yeah.
So 29, or yeah, you're looking at the annotated notes, right?
Yes.
You want me to read it, or you want to keep going? I don't mind either way.
Oh, the next bit?
Yeah. Reading it. That is.
From like Pathos of Distance again, or from Emerson?
Oh, no, I think it's from Emerson itself.
Okay,
just
cool.
To keep going.
Cool. So we just took like a 5-minute break, and just as like a little like housekeeping, just so you guys know, I've got a website. It's called into-the-absurd.com. Go check it out. All the latest episodes are on there. You can find all the links to all the episodes on there. You can find all the show notes, all the descriptions, everything. And I'm also on Twitter as absurd into, I think is my username. So yeah, like go follow me for all the latest updates on the show. And yeah, and just as a side note, if you're looking for just some like really Zen music to listen to, go check out Pink Floyd's album, the what's it called, The Division Bell. Yeah, check that out. And then that first song, Cluster One, I think it's called. That song will just like bring you into like a sleep mode. It's awesome. Yeah, and as for Self-Reliance, it'll probably be, so this will be part 4, right? And then we'll have 5 more parts after this with Mynaa. And then I was like thinking about having Keegan on with Mynaa, and then we'll maybe do like a wrap up like episode, maybe like a tri-part episode, but we'll see what Keegan says about that. Anyhow, yeah, let's get back into it. Perfect, you're back.
Yep.
Cool. All right. All right. Our reading is mendicant and sycophantic. In history, our imagination plays us false. Kingdom and lordship, power and estate are a guardier vocabulary that Private John and Edward in a small house in common days work. But the things of life are the same to both. The sum total of both is the same. Why all this defense to Alfred and Skanderbeg and Gustavus? Suppose they were virtuous, did they wear out virtue? As great a stake depends on your private act today, as followed their public and renowned steps. When private men shall act with original views, the lustre will be transferred from the actions of kings to those of gentlemen.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. So,
from kings to gentlemen.
What actually sticks out to me the most is, as great a stake depends on your private act today, as followed their public and renowned steps. This reminds me of Nietzsche talking about public opinion as private laziness, because again, when you just adopt, when you either with or without thought, to adopt, and people wonder why bad ideas get spread. And it's like, man, it seems like it's just with us, it's like just shooting fish in a barrel, how does it happen? It's like, well, people need to believe in something. And it seems like almost, and then with what people inevitably believe in, sometimes you're just like, wow, like it's just anything, isn't it? It could be, do you ever see that Family Guy where they go back in time and Brian's like, yeah, Jesus wasn't as impressive as they said, and like he's doing that trick where he takes his thumb off or something? Like, it's pretty ridiculous.
I don't remember that, but well, I mean, it sounds familiar, but
yeah, it was something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. But he's saying, like, this reminds me of the notion of making the mistake of having a hero, or you build these men and these figures up in your head, and it's for good reason. But if you actually get close to it, it's you'll see the ghost before long. It's in your head. Kingdom and lordship, power and estate are gaudier vocabulary than, let's say, a private John and a private Edward and a small house in common day work, but things of life are the same to both. The needs are the same, right? At the end of the day, like food's always going to be a problem, water is always going to be a problem, shelter is always going to be a problem, sex is always going to be a problem. Suppose they were virtuous. Did they wear out virtue? The notion like, what? Oh, they used it all up. You can't have it anymore. And we're using a Nietzschean conception of virtue here, right? It's not, it's virtue with, like, maybe a more stylistic middle finger than the typical middle finger, less Socratic, more Nietzschean, because from Socratic, Platonic to Christian, then it's a long time till Nietzsche, let's say. And then let's see, as a note, I guess I thought of, when private men shall act with the original views, the lustre will be transferred from the actions of kings to those of gentlemen. Yeah, it's this was, I guess there's a reason why at the same time, Nietzsche said, or Zarathustra says, at least, where the rabble drink all is poison.
Yeah.
But that's not what Emerson's talking about here. He's talking about, well, where does the edification take place? Where does the actual distance take place? Even Nietzsche, it took him a while to see from the heights.
Well, sometimes mountains are very long.
Yeah, no, and you're hitting switchbacks, man, back and forth, back and forth. Is this thing ever going to stop? Outdoor fun, it's often called type 2 fun, because it's not, in the moment it's not fun. It's fun after the fact, but it's
I don't know, I have a lot of fun when I'm hiking.
Sure, I was thinking like a more a long slog that, like, your people get tired of, or certain.
The worst part is the way back.
Yeah, sure.
When you're hiking down, like, because you get up and then you're like, oh man, now I have to hike all the way back down.
Yeah, it depends, and it also depends on what you're doing. Like,
it hurts your knees.
If you're doing serious climbing or rappelling or whatever the case may be, then it's like by the time you're done, you could be really shot out, and then and then it's even more painful. And then sometimes people die in these processes. And I don't mean die, I mean like it's probably more of like a transcendental experience.
Yeah,
but it happens sometimes, like you die into it because it's so horrible. It's such a horrible experience that you're just resigned to it, and then you become one with the horror.
Well, it's like when you're like writing a book, right? And then you finish the book, and then you're like, I just finished it. I just spent years on this thing. Like, it's done. It's done.
Oh yeah, you gotta go on. Yeah, because then it's almost like you're back to the bottom again. It's almost like, I guess it's also like graduation. It's like, great, like you were special. You got a cap and gown for a second, and then it's like, okay, now here's the work a day. Yeah, exactly. And we're still not impressed. And then you work for a while, and people still say we're still not impressed. I had someone ask me, they're like, don't people believe in? And it's like, no, they're gonna not believe you and not believe you and not believe you. They're basically, and that means they're gonna be demanding a yes from you if you're trying to say no. They're gonna be demanding a yes from you, and they're not gonna believe you until you can make them believe. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're not gonna believe you. It's always been this way. It's like, at what point have you proven yourself? Again, at the very least, I don't know if we've already passed it or if we're coming to it in this essay, but when Emerson talks about saying, like, it's part of why they're afraid of the children, right? It's probably part of why, because inevitably it's going to be that some of them, they're going to make us look small. They're going to make us look bad. They're going to make us look stupid, and then we don't like, it's like, hey, look good, be good, do good, procreate, but like, don't do it too good, or people will be upset or jealous or resentful or whatever it is that people may be about it, or inspired, right. That's the big one, right? They, again, each thing, like every such act, it carries that reverberation, right? It carries that. That's why he says it matters, because I wouldn't call it karma, because karma, we made karma up just like we made a lot of things up. But there clearly is, when it comes to that network of human relations, we're only so far removed from each other, regardless, because it's like, look, there's no secret decoder ring, and like, not everyone's the same, not everyone's equal, not just because we're the same from the same nation doesn't mean we're friends. Just because we're the same race doesn't mean we're friends. Like, there's so many stipulations that we don't even discuss, that are actually in the
same family doesn't mean
exactly. Doesn't mean you're close, doesn't mean you love them, doesn't mean you like them, doesn't mean you want to be near them. And it's like the kind of lip service that's given to just how complex and deep these social relations really are, and these arbitrary natures of them as well, that it's given lip service. At least in modern discourse, like, there's obviously thinkers out there who take these things seriously. So, but we're talking about, again, like, in terms of the larger shaping force, like, what are most people aware of, and what most people are aware of is the zeitgeist, right?
Yes.
And then, as he says here, the great men kind of they seem to represent that. It's like Nietzsche says, it's accumulation of the forces of centuries, and they manifest, like, inevitably they come around again, and they manifest in some individual, and usually we have a story to tell after the fact.
Yes.
So you want to go ahead and read the next little bit?
Yeah. The world has been instructed by its kings, who have so magnetized the eyes of nations. It has been taught by the colossal symbol and mutual reverence that is due from man to man, the joyful loyalty with which men have everywhere suffered the king, the noble, or the great proprietor to walk among them by a law of his own, make his own scale of men and things, and reverse theirs, pay for benefits not with money but with honor, and represent the law in his person, was a hieroglyphic by which they obscurely signified their consciousness of their own right and comeliness, the right of every man.
Right. So that's actually kind of decay. This reminds me of Zarathustra asking, and what became of kings and what became of princes. And then obviously, he talks about, he addresses higher men in there, but Emerson says it here. What was once reserved for the few, it became further democratized. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that wasn't necessarily an improvement either on the values or the people.
Yeah.
Right, because we've been flying blind on this process since forever. Mm-hmm. Like we have some like what do you call it, intuitions. We're like, well, if we try to educate these idiots, maybe something will happen.
Yes.
And it's just the way it's all we can do. It's the best we can do so far.
But I will add there that sometimes things that were reserved for a few then go to the many, often go back to the few. But to a different kind of few, at least. They become old. They become not useless, but not.
Oh,
really
sure.
Like
well, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? If it's cyclical, it all comes and goes. It all rises again. It all washes ashore again.
Yes.
It comes and it goes. It's created. It's destroyed.
Yes. Yep. Just like building sandcastles.
Right. And so I guess once upon a time, just like believing in God, the belief in kings and, because you can look back through history and go like, okay, people have there's always been the suicidal, there's always been the insane, there's always been, some people with nihilistic tendency, like these phenomena that existed. It's just, and it was never before, I think, on a scale in which we could come to understand it or relate it or compile the data, to see what it really looks like from afar.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling my friend like the other day, I was like, there have been times in history where people were killing each other over whether one imaginary man in the sky created the universe or a team of imaginary men in the sky created the universe, right? And it's like they're like literally killing each other over this thought, over this idea. And like, why were they doing that?
Well, psychoanalysis tells you it's post hoc rationalization that comes after the fact of evolved primate who thought he was separate from the world, but in reality, he was just reacting to both internal and external pressures, which demanded that, as one power rises, inevitably the second most dominant power must face off, because otherwise its fate is sealed forever. It'll forever be a prey to that higher power. Right? Like it needs to assert itself or it winds up lower in the food chain. This has been power over time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, but in terms of the earlier sentiment, sure. And that, and let the best men, the best women, the best whoever, hey, let it win.
Yes.
But now I'll say, well, in theory, I guess so, if it's a caterpillar that learns how to be a snake, let it win.
Yeah. Oh, so, yeah, you watched that video I sent you, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I sent you that picture before, right? So, but on the earlier sentiment, in terms of that, just what are we seeing here? I'm going to read this quotation here. Quote, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open so much terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age." End quote.
Wow. Isn't that from the Gay Signs?
No, that's Lovecraft from Call of Cthulhu, circa early 19, is it?
Okay.
Late teens. early 1920, somewhere around there.
I just feel like I've like read that before. Was
Oh
that
yeah,
in the
it's one of his
conspiracy
most famous. Yeah, it could well be, but it's one of his most it's one of his most famous stories, one of his most favorite famous lines. But and
Oh,
or I can also relate it, like there's a Neil Young song, is it Thrashers, where he says, when science slashed open the pearly gates, and
yeah,
that was and that Nietzsche understood what that meant. He might
yeah,
not have been the first. It's argued that it wasn't really his idea, and he wasn't the first to even say it or put it forward. And it isn't even the first time it appeared in history, because there's histories of dying gods and and other stories and mythos and ideas out there. But at the same time, I think the way he owned it,
yeah,
he made it his. The madman was
yeah.
clearly his.
Mhm.
The parable was all him. And then what he did with the concept, because to me, like a concept like the heaviest burden, that other important aphorism, it's like, to me, it's like, okay, and why is it the heaviest burden? Why does this even exist?
Yeah,
This came into being for a specific reason. And it's like, well, whether Nietzsche called it, the horror of the atomistic age, or the age of the actor, or any of these other ages he called, to denote just how much our suffering would increase, and kind of some of the how and why of it.
mhm,
Yeah. It's like, okay, so why does that even matter? And it's like, well,
yeah,
because it kind of comes from the death of God. It comes from these massive changes that are coming, that we don't know how thoroughly changed we will be, and we don't know, what it's going to do to us.
yes,
And that still holds true, and then, the assumption is, well, we know, but at the very least we can say we will see.
yes,
I think that's about the most truthful thing I can say on the matter.
yeah. I mean, like that's how it's always been.
Mhm.
We will see. Let's find out.
Let's say how much time. What? Okay, I think we can probably do. Wait, this seems like a bit of a long one. Do you want to cut this one and
Yeah, let's cut.
maybe spend the last
Let's
few?
see. Let's look. Yeah, you mean like cut at this one? Just
Yeah, just because
yeah.
if we gotta
Well,
head out soon.
We'll see. Like after I read it, we'll see how it
Okay,
goes.
yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. The magnetism which all original action exerts is explained when we inquire the reason of self-trust. Who is the trustee? What is the aboriginal self, on which a universal reliance may be grounded? What is the nature and power of that science-baffling star, without parallax, without calculable elements, which shoots a ray of beauty even into trivial and impure actions, if the least mark of independence appear? The inquiry leads us to that source, at once the essence of genius, of virtue, and of life, which we call spontaneity or instinct. We denote this primary wisdom as intuition, whilst all later teachings are tuitions. In that deep force, the last fact behind which analysis cannot go, all things find their common origin. For the sense of being, which in calm hours rises, we know not how, in the soul, is not diverse from things, from space, from light, from time, from man, but one with them, and proceeds obviously from the same source whence their life and being also proceed. We first share the life by which things exist, and afterwards see them as appearances in nature, and forget that we have shared their cause. Here is the fountain of action and of thought. Here are the lungs of that inspiration which giveth man wisdom, and which cannot be denied without impiety and atheism. We lie in the lap of immense intelligence, which makes us receivers of its truth and organs of its activity. When we discern justice, when we discern truth, we do nothing of ourselves, but allow a passage to its beams. If we ask whence this comes, if we seek to pry into the soul that causes, all philosophy is at fault. Its presence or its absence is all we can affirm. Every man discriminates between the voluntary acts of his mind and his involuntary perceptions, and knows that to his involuntary perceptions a perfect faith is due. He may err in the expression of them, but he knows that these things are so, like day and night, not to be disputed. My willful actions and acquisitions are but roving, the idealist's reverie, the faintest native emotion, command my curiosity and respect. Thoughtless people contradict as readily the statement of perceptions as of opinions, or rather much more readily, for they do not distinguish between perceptions and notions. They fancy that I choose to see this or that thing. But perceptions is not whimsical, but fatal. If I see a trait, my children will see it after me, and in course of time all mankind, although it may chance that no one has seen it before me, for my perceptions of it is as much a fact as the sun.
Oh, so good. And see, that makes me think of that, the very first part of Zarathustra, when, there he is talking to himself.
Yeah.
His son, right?
Yes.
You've read the beginning? Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh, it's so good.
For my perception of it is as much a fact as the sun.
Yeah, and I guess you could say, okay, well, that might be a bit slapstick, and you can get all pedantic with it, but then you're missing the point, right?
Yes.
Emerson himself says you can't spend the day in explanation, and inevitably you got to draw your line,
Yeah.
And I guess because I feel like other people and philosophers, maybe even whole subgenres of philosophy, have made philosophies out of just forever just deferring judgment and ethos. It's like, okay, well, you've said a lot of nothing then. What do you actually, what's the actual purpose of this? Does it serve a purpose? And I don't mean that it has to be utilitarian, and I don't mean that it has to be, just function per se. Sometimes art is just art, but it's never
like,
been
what's the
just
point?
art.
Like, tell us the point, right?
Kind of, because you could say art is art, but that's a lie too,
Yeah.
Let's see. So like I said, that last part makes me think of Zarathustra, but then earlier, let's see, the inquiry leads us to the source, at least from the essence of genius, of virtue, of life, which we call spontaneity or instinct. So do you remember that part on language we read earlier?
Yeah.
Let's see, let me find it.
Yeah, the inquiry leads us to that source at once the essence of genius, of virtue, and of life, which we call spontaneity or instinct.
Right. So if you remember, man is a dwarf of himself, or man is a god in rune, yet he sometimes, this is from earlier, yet sometimes he starts in his slumber and wonders at himself and his house, and muses strangely at the resemblance betwixt him and it. So he perceives that if law is paramount, if still he have elemental power, if his word is sterling yet in nature, it is not conscious power, it is not inferior, but superior to his will and instinct. So he's basically saying that notion of recognizing that something's wrong, to me, it's almost like Nietzsche recognizing his own pessimism and nihilism. And where he started, it's kind of struck out on his own, right? Where he really kind of, I guess he would call it self-overcoming, but even where he saw it in himself and he saw the downward course, and then he saw what he had to do and wanted to do and all that good stuff. That was what Emerson's talking about him. That was what was superior in him. That was the healthy instinct. That's what led him to his, his joyful wisdom. It's that, and that questioning, it actually wasn't what was inferior. The fact that he was living life as a god in rune, as a dwarf of himself. That's a pretty serious and sad indictment, and this is over 100 years ago. That situation hasn't changed actually, right? Like we're living in the further aftermath, but go on, you're starting to say.
Well, I mean, like, I think of all the times that I think of like my ideal self, right? Where I'm thinking like, maybe I'll be doing this in 20 years. Maybe I'll come up with like that great like work that I really want to write, right? And then I feel like a dwarf to that Greg over there in 20 years from now. I feel weak. I feel like nothing compared to him.
Right. He might as well be, the conception of him is like a tower. And I guess within the notion of the self as it exists in the West, which some Westerners criticize as the homunculi behind the eye, and which some people also say, obviously, never mind the fiction of the self or notion doctrines of no self, be they old or new or any of that stuff, all that stuff aside. It's like, again, that notion of whether it's us telling you, Greg, that you can become that, or the manifestation of something like that in the world that you see. Like, yes, where have we gotten it wrong that instead it curses you rather than, I don't know, maybe blessing you? Because you would think that your civilization might have, your best interest, and maybe not even, it doesn't have to be your best interest, but maybe just even your health or your posterity
Yeah.
or that of your children in mind. And to the degrees that America falls short on these standards, because you see it in life expectancy
Yes.
going down, you see it in increased crime, you see it in the decadence and the decline, you see it in the falling apart of families. Like we see it, for all the nice statistics that certain scientists and thinkers want to look at. Every time, like I've been watching those guys for years, and like I see them, and then behind them I just see, like all books and books that were both written and unwritten, showing you other stats and data. And I'm like, guys, you are not doing the proper accounting here. And to me, it's the difference between, I don't know, Nietzsche and, I don't know, give me almost any idealist. Kierkegaard's, well, maybe.
No, Kant. That's a better
Yeah,
example.
probably. Well, yeah, actually, probably. Yeah, because Kant, at the very least, whether, I don't remember if Nietzsche says this or not, but like with Kant, it's like, he at least believed enough to do all that effort. Like he at least wanted to believe. I get that, so because some philosophers, and I think I get it more from the past, that plenty of them were actually sincere, even if they made gratuitous errors or, whatever the case may be.
I mean, I think of Kierkegaard kind of like the Christian Camus.
Sure.
From an older time. I mean, at least like reading Fear and Trembling, and then reading Myth of Sisyphus.
Right. But I mean, even the transcendentalists, it's like, he talks a lot about God and spirit, and he capitalized self there. But I mean, again, I think I'm not going to say much about his belief, because he actually doesn't say much, because he's otherwise genius, regardless of any notion of God or the transcendent. But I think the way he talks about it, he's making it clear what he sees as transcendent. And it's in the same fashion of, again, it's everyone who came before. It's and in the case of Nietzsche, those who came after, it's recognizable. Once you can hear and see it, it's like you hear and see it immediately. And then from there, you can see and hear if it's real really quickly. Oh, and I asked a question there of, instinct over conditioning, genius over virtue. I don't know where I was going with that on that annotated note. Would you note this? I don't know if it wound up being gibberish and I gave up on it, or if I just forgot to finish the thought.
The inquiry leads us to that source, at once the essence of genius, of virtue, and of life, which we call spontaneity and instinct. Instinct over conditioning, genius over virtue. Okay, so
genius is what derives the virtue, i.e. the values. Instinct is actually that, again, instinct is the healthy thing where you wake up and go, oh wait, something's wrong. I made an error. Right? Like recognizing the weakness, recognizing the sickness, that's always the first step, and it's inevitable. It's incontrovertible, and then what entails the suffering.
Well, I'll if I ever come to my dad with a problem, he always says, well, what does your gut say?
I like it. I like his way of deferring responsibility back to you. He's like, look, you're over 18. I'm not responsible for you. What do you think?
Well, he's always said it. He's always said this to me, like since I was a little kid. He's always said, well, what does your gut say, Greg?
And sometimes did you really just say, I want an answer, damn it?
No, I always told him what my gut said. And then I'm like, and then he's like, okay, well, so what do you ever think?
Do you ever say your gut's stupid? It's probably nice if he didn't. I was just curious. It'd be horrible, a mean thing to say to his child. It's funny because people have long taken great pleasure in cruelty against children. It's just it's funny.
They have.
And against each other. It could be quite sophisticated. Sometimes it's just so simple. So where do you want to? We should probably. Oh no, we got a few, I guess.
Honestly, I think we could just read this next paragraph.
Well, actually, but I know you said
that last one was so long.
Yeah, that's what I say. Let's at least, because that was more like the first half. When we discern justice, when we discern truth, we do nothing of ourselves but allow a passage to its beams. If we ask whence this comes, if we seek to pry into the soul that causes, all philosophy is at fault. Oh, I think again, if it's self-derived, if you're a creator instead of a corpse, then you know the truth of it. Its presence or its absence is all we can confirm. That's true too. I mean, as true as anything, in terms of like philosophical, but again, the issue with Emerson is actually that a lot of his stuff is like Nietzsche, where it's bedrock. And, what you can usually do is you can talk around it, you can talk in between it, you can talk about what he said and what he didn't say, but you actually can't really pry it. You know what I mean? It's there. It's, and if they, in a lot, and with a lot of the ideas, again, like the transcendent, it's rooted in time. It's, we have a whole culture and civilization amassed around it, from Homer to Nietzsche.
Yeah. I mean, there's like been times in history where like people, like a thought, or like at least a way of thinking kind of spreads around, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, there's both education, and then there's always been, smaller forces, and it's hard to estimate how much one person does or doesn't change just by their existence in the world, of how they affect other people. It can be big or small, and no one actually, like, we actually don't have a science to measure this. We don't know what that actual, I'll call it a karmic web, even though that's just a concept. It's a bit of jargon that doesn't matter.
Well, but we're saying it.
We're talking about the literal psychic network that manifests in real time. Meaning, if I'm walking down the street and you perceive that I'm a bit fidgety and shady looking, you're gonna be minding your piece. You're gonna be on guard. It's just natural.
I might even walk across the street.
Yeah, right. So again, we affect each other, right? Not only that, our words do too, right? And we know this. It's why people like to control each other. It's why people like to attack each other. It's why it's part of the rationale might be a post hoc rationalization of the fact that, again, it's warfare is in us. It's part of nature. Conflict,
well, it's also like who you're walking with when you're like walking by that shady guy, right? Like if you're with your friends and like you're probably like, whatever, just some dude.
And then if you're in a more vulnerable position, you're aware of that. As an intelligent animal, to assess the situation and make a judgment call. And like, to these degrees, we do have a certain freedom. I don't know what you'd call it. I wouldn't call it a free will. I would, because to me, it's like, that's anything but free. It's like, oh, you mean I could have been walking along not concerned with anything in theory, and now I am in theory protecting my life. Like, that's actually not, if that's free will, that's a shit choice. Like, no wonder why so many people are depressed and nihilistic, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's planet predator. This is more like our true nature.
If you carry around a hammer, everything's going to become a nail.
Right. And then I would say, yes, you can philosophize with the hammer, but you should also know how to build, because as Zarathustra says, a breaker is also creator.
Yeah.
It's not just, Emerson didn't just attack what do you call it? The mediocrity and squalid contentment of the times, right? He didn't just attack, like he was creating something beautiful in time. If it's like ripping out the old dead weeds, he planted a nice little garden, right? And from it, he's influenced many thinkers. Many people. He's influencing us right now. He's influencing who's ever listening, whether they like it or, whether they like it or not, whether they want it or not. Yeah, I know. It bastards, huh? Yeah. Like, by the time you realize what's the game that's been pulled on you, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's like,
Nietzsche just crept into our mind.
Oh, I was going to say heart, but yeah, sure. That too. No, I mean, to the degree that, the mind, I see the mind as the body as the heart. There is no, to me, like, the seed is the same.
Well, the blood needs to pump up to that brain. Keep it going.
Yeah. And if you're going to see to the heights, make sure, if you're not used to it, make sure you bring enough oxygen. Yeah. Right? People don't realize like how thin the air gets, how much it can throw. You could, change your physiology. It throws you off whack.
I haven't actually gone that high yet, like on a mountain.
Oh yeah. Because I mean, eventually all the trees die away. All the trees are gone because trees can't live that high. They get, what happens to the trees?
What?
When they live that high? Oh, they're inevitably cannon fodder for the lightning.
Yeah.
Like when a tree tries to grow that high, nature goes, nuh-uh, zap, boom. And that's why there's no trees on tall mountains. Oh, past certain elevations, obviously.
Yeah.
But once you hit that threshold,
and also this might not be any dirt, it might just be rock.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a number of factors, but I mean, to the degree that you can see a tree take root in a rock, and so long as it gets enough water and nutrients from the nearby sediment and dust and whatnot, like a tree can grow in a crack like nothing. But right, and then in very few animals can also adapt past certain elevations too, so the ecosystem becomes very sparse,
Yeah.
And then again, the very notion of living at the heights is counterintuitive. Very few cultures actually live at greater heights simply because it's so difficult.
Yes. I mean, like, why do people go north?
Yeah, you
Like,
mean
seriously.
like why would you want to go like, yeah, it keeps getting colder and colder. We should have stayed back where it was warmer.
Well, I can imagine them like going during the summer and then
Oh yeah, being like, oh, this ain't
it's
too bad,
like-
guys. And by the time, well, yeah, and I guess those early
then the
humans,
snow
like,
cart starts falling, then you're like, wait.
yeah, wait, shoot, did someone learn how to build igloos? Like we just got here. But I guess by the time I'm assuming that by the time they'd already settled there, like they already intuitively understood the seasons.
Yeah, or it was already the ice age, and then they
Yeah.
were like already there. So it's
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
cold
a
was
lot of
like
things go into
whatever.
it.
Who knows? We're not archaeologists.
No, but I would say that no, but I think I do think what kind of holds true as a measure
Yeah.
is that by the time we were studying stars, I do think that we had already intuitively understood them, just like what do you call it? Just like, you know, somehow a salmon knows to swim to its stream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that exact programming, whatever that is. Like I think that was in us with a lot of things, right? Not
Yeah.
just navigation.
Yeah.
At least in terms of, I would say we probably recognize the changing of the seasons and certain migration patterns.
Yeah.
Because it seems obvious, because you know we have a trace that, oh yeah, we moved around a lot. We're to this day we're still moving, you know, like
Yeah.
like still looking for better pastures. It's like we've been everywhere,
Yeah.
but you know, still the dream is there.
Yeah. Or like if you throw a baby in a pool, like it'll swim.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those ones are pretty great. And
Don't
then that
do
instinct
that,
to grab a. Yeah. And then you say, well, if you leave it there long enough, it'll die. I thought that's where you were going for some reason. I was like, well, let's see what the experiment is. Maybe you have a good hypothesis. But no, it's a good one.
True though, we're the only primate that if you like throw us in the water when we're a baby, like we won't like drown immediately.
Oh yeah. Well, we're also, I think,
Yeah.
we're some of the best climbers.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you can watch monkeys and certain primates, you know, they're amazing climbers, and especially even on rocks, right? Because, you know, they have the tail, which helps them more with the trees, even though the tail helps them with balance. But
Yeah.
like, I'll try and find this clip and send it to you, but it's this little guy, and he winds up, he's navigating this real tiny crimp of a grab, right? And like, he first tries to grab it, like on this dyno move, right? Just a dynamic move up the wall.
Yeah.
Where he jumps up this wall and grabs it like it's borderline Matrix, but he misses it, does a backflip off the wall with his feet. Then he goes again, grabs it, crimps, and then crimps sideways quickly to the right, and like jumps up and over, and like escape is at the top of the cage. Like he just engineered his own escape with this dynamic hard ass climb that you probably could never do as a human, because your body weight wouldn't, maybe not allow it. I don't know. Maybe you could.
But we can
I
swim,
bet there's
man.
climbers
We
who can
swim.
But it was incredible. And then what was the other ones? I guess it doesn't matter. Did we cover that whole thing?
Did we get?
Not really.
Yeah.
Well, there's maybe a few more thoughts, because we said a few earlier.
But we got to get to that. My willful actions and acquisitions are but roving. The idealist reverie, the faintest native emotion command my curiosity and respect. Yeah, the faintest native emotion command my curiosity and respect.
Yes, he's taking this. He's giving himself credit here.
Yes.
You know, he's not declaring bankruptcy. This is like the opposite of just whether it's going along, being completely obedient to the point of bankruptcy, going against the grain to the degrees that doesn't mean you're going against others. It means you're going against whatever it is inside you, that when you feel that instinct towards health, that instinct towards health that tells you you're going against the grain isn't going yourself. Like that's what comes to mind, right? That's the kernel here. And, you know, obviously, or not obviously, but when I say going against the grain, it's specific reference to a Nietzsche aphorism from Daybreak.
Yeah.
And obviously this part, thoughtless people contradict as readily as the statement. I think I might have laughed a bit or tried not to laugh. Thoughtless people contradict as readily the statement of perceptions as of opinions, or rather much more readily, for they do not distinguish between perception and notion. I'd also say language. People can get hung up on dotting I's and crossing T's, yet again, they won't distinguish perception, notion, context, or even whatever native kind of value system or measuring stick you might be using. So it's just absurd. You know, it reminds me of earlier in the essay when he says something like, polite people, like I give my ear too easy to the polite and civilized. I can't remember how he words it, but the sentiment is what matters, right? So when he says something like they sway me too much, he's going against his own healthy instinct, going like, why would I listen to? Because I see what they're offering for me. They can't actually reciprocate what I have.
Yeah.
Rather, they more readily contradict, for they do not distinguish between perception and notion. They fancy that I choose to see this or that thing, but perception is not whimsical, but fatal. If I see a trait, my children will see it after me, and in the course of time, all mankind. Although it may chance that no one has seen it before me, for my perception of it as much as the fact of the sun. And oh God, I can't help but think of Nietzsche revealing so much about trait, not just trait theory, but temper. Trait. He talked a lot about trait theory before it existed, temperament before it existed. All of these the petty things in us, the little things in us, the little human things in us, right? The animal things in us. Like again, if Zarathustra is everything in one, then I can almost feel like, or term it like so much rest of his work is chopping that up and identifying that and understanding it, good and bad, healthy and sick, right? And none of it was to say, to issue more thou shalt and shall nots, not to say back to good and evil, not to continue this serpentine dance of a dragon, at least for those who hear and understand, because again, to everyone else, Zarathustra is just putting out thine eyes, it's just a lightning bolt.
Yes.
But there it is. From my perception, as much of a fact as the sun. What's the line? Let's see. Let's go. We can end on this note, I suppose.
Well, just as a side note, I mean, that kind of goes back to how, like, our ancestors, they were way better off mistaking a stick for a snake than mistaking a snake for a stick, right?
Yes, or not seeing it, period. Yes, bingo. Very important. These are very crucial, like in terms of perception and how important this is, and the fact that language is a communication of perception. Like it winds up being the most important thing in the world to us. And yet people will go around and they'll say things like, oh, we made it up, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. Things are relative. Oh, anything goes. It's like, okay, I get it. Depending on how Machiavellian we want to be, sure. Depending on how silly we want to be, sure. Depending on how suicidally liberal we want to be, sure. But back to what might be a fact of as much as the sun, those are the facts of which we are concerned. Zarathustra, Nietzsche, Emerson. So let me find it. Thou great star, what would be thy happiness if thou hast not for those whom thou shinest? For 10 years hast thou climbed hither unto my cave, right? It's just for him. Like, right, he belongs here. This is me. Sorry, I'm interrupting the flow. Quote, thou would have wearied of thy light and of the journey, had it not been for me, mine eagle and my serpent. Right? It doesn't exist without him. He's laying the sense. This is Nietzsche. If part of Emerson's criticism was that men created the sun and the moon, and then now men just follow the sun and women follow the moon, this is Nietzsche recreating it.
Yeah.
Among other things, because if we were going to do a dissection of this, like we would dedicate probably like an hour to, I don't know, even more. I mean, honestly, if we wanted to do Emerson, right, we would too, but we're just doing our thing. And hopefully everyone and no one who hears it enjoys themselves. Maybe they even laugh, that would be good too.
Yeah, or maybe they're like in a dark room somewhere, like listening to it, crying.
Oh, well, and hopefully their suffering cures them, right? I mean, well, because like Zarathustra says, there is no way, like, if you're looking, like, if you're expecting someone else, like, it's not coming from above, it's not coming from below, it comes from within.
Exactly.
Self-derived, self-originating, and I get it, it's nature, it's her will. But what is an education, but if not harnessing your will over time that you put towards a certain end? And for those who aren't contented, because I've made jokes about being fungus or being future Skynet denizens or pod people, whatever it may be, right? Maybe we're like Wall-E people and we forget that there's other people around us. Like maybe we're kind of already halfway there. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain, a cold rail from a green grass, right? You have to see that suffering to see the light, right? You have to.
So you think you can tell?
Yeah.
Blue skies from pain. Yeah. It's we learn, I guess, we learn or we don't. But
Yeah.
regardless, it's like we are the material that is tempered, and what comes
Yeah.
of us, like you talking about future, Greg, it's like, hey, I would rather, you mentioned being discouraged. Like I would rather, like, maybe you could be excited about that. Okay, maybe here's a question. Rather than the heaviest burden, I'll say, what could actually make you excited about, like, taking that step towards whatever that ideal you is? Because that's what that question is. The future you, it's a question of an ideal. And what would actually, like, make you happy about that, man? What's your gay style? Like, what's the thesis of your gay science on the way there? Like something like that.
Yeah.
And you can answer now if you want, but you could be rhetorical if you want.
We'll leave it rhetorical, but yeah, it's like, what brings you excitement for the future is you're working towards a future that you want, right? That's what makes you excited about it. Like, I might go to Belize with my girlfriend next Christmas, and there's this deal, like the donate plasma, and I took it. I'm like, oh yeah, never in my life it was like, yeah, I'll donate plasma. That's trash. But now I'm like, oh yeah, I got to save it for Belize. I'll donate some plasma. I'm excited.
Oh, okay. Well, better than pimping yourself out.
Yeah.
Plasma here, give some other DNA over there. Like you might be like $20 closer. That's cool though.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, no, whether it's short term or long term, because I think it really, again, talking about a healthy impulse, it's like, it seems to me we need short term and long term. If for those who want to take themselves seriously, let's say, for those who actually have a vision and have creativity, like, you need short-term vision and long-term vision. You need, and like, you don't, it's like, look, you don't become a master fighter by just arbitrarily like hitting a punching bag, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it takes focus, discipline in a certain direction. Everything in life is that way. There's nothing like, I don't know that modern people are impatient, or with specialty came a very peculiar laziness or lack of understanding of just how hard existence is, or anything worthwhile here, at least. How hard it is truly to create or do something, especially if it's novel or new.
But I will also, like, add all that like, yes, it takes like 10,000 punches to be a black belt, right? But like, you have to enjoy those 10,000 punches. They're like,
I think you're right? Because I think you can suffer from them. You're gonna,
well, yeah, but like, suffer in
if you spend 10,000 hours mastering a guitar, by the time you're playing, let's say not even good, but decently, like, you already have calluses on your finger, and your fingers hurt a lot less, things like that. Like, there's plenty of areas in life where we can take very concrete measures, and it's like, I don't think anyone's ever happy all the time. Like, that would, and I don't mean it can't.
I'm not saying like happy, like, like not being happy like while you're doing the 10,000, but being like grateful to have the opportunity to suffer for what's ahead, right?
Well, I'd say it's the embracing, right? It's the question, right? Can you love your fate?
Yes.
That's what Nietzsche asked. Can you love yours? He had what sustained him, and then for anyone else, this is the question of, do they have what they need? And I think people know, like, inevitably, whether they listen to that healthy instinct. I know I've actually had some friends recently tell me a story or two about this, where they that was the exact word they used. They said it was making me sick, and then sure enough, they get away. They become better. Like, it happens in us. It's not like we're not all the same shape. We're not all the same pattern, but it's if you find yourself there in that territory, it's a question that demands to be answered. It's a problem that demands to be solved. And then I guess this is where we suffer, because we don't even have to be conscious that there is a problem to suffer from it. You know what I mean? Like, that seems to be the end conclusion of psychology, is like, oh, we're not even conscious of what causes the suffering, but we know that we suffer. Well, it's like, and again, that's actually a very pessimistic conclusion of a science. And I'm not saying that psychology is such that's their organized, like that's their slogan, or that everyone believes that. I'm just saying it's an understanding within the larger framework.
Yes. Well, that was good. That was part
great,
4
man.
of Self-Reliance. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Mynaa. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All All right, well, we will continue on the end of page 10. The relations of the soul to the divine spirit are so pure. Thank you for listening. And if you get a chance, go check out bezabazaar.com to see hundreds of awesome aphorisms that Mynaa wrote himself. They're amazing. Go check that out.
Oh, well, thank you.
And just have a good day. Be self-reliant today if you can. And if not, that's fine. You know, we can't always be self-reliant every day. So take it easy.